Christina asked me a bit ago, I guess it was a year ago, I didn't know it was that long ago, I would have said a couple months. And it was far enough away, I said, sure, that sounds great. And, and then, boy, it came up fast. So I was working on it last night, but I have been thinking about it for several months. I'm a bit over 2 years into my tenure at the Bray. I came here in the summer of 2022 to be the executive director. And I approached this talk, I was talking to Christina maybe about a month ago, and I was like, wow, I'm not. I think, when we first talked about it, I was like, yeah, by then I'll know so much about the Bray and about the history, and I still feel like a newbie. I still feel like there's so much I have to know. So I'm approaching this talk not as a historian, but kind of as like a fellow traveler who's waded hip deep into this river of Macon that exists in Helena, Montana, for whatever reason. It's kind of interesting. So we'll look at some of the pieces from the Holder's permanent collection by artists who've had a deep connection to the Bray, have worked here, or moved through here, or drew a line through here with thought or action. And then you're the clicker. Okay.
I can do that.
You can do the clicking, and then I can do it. So the Archie Bray Foundation, I'm sure all of you know of it, or have been there, or just came from there, like on your way here. 3 miles outside of town, widely regarded as the birthplace of contemporary ceramic art in the United States. I'm going to turn this way so you guys' face. Let me get this set up. Okay, so Western Clay Manufacturing, the 26-acre historic brickyard campus of the Archie Bray Foundation for the Ceramic Arts, we're just going to call it the Bray because that's a really long name, was founded in the foothills of Montana Rockies in 1951 by entrepreneur, brickmaker, and avid arts patron Archie Bray, who intended for it to be a place to make available for all who are seriously interested in the ceramic arts a fine place to work. I love that. As a mission statement, it's pretty modest, like a fine place to work. It's like not the best place to work in the world, not a great place. It's fine. It's a fun place to work. So, and I think it's really important too because it centers it on the work, right? It's not about the object afterwards or what you do with it. It's about the work that goes into it. So our primary mission is to provide an environment and connection with other artists that stimulates creative work in ceramics. Or as we've been referring to it lately, it's called a spark. So, there's Archie. I think I'm off one. Whatever. So here's Archie. So the Holter that opened in 1987, which I had no idea was so new, provided space for the Helena community to experience contemporary art in central Montana. So Christina shared with me this kind of rich stew I've been mudding about in. And it's one of the main reasons the Holter came into being was the connection between the Archie Bray and the artists that came to work at the Bray. So I picked 10 pieces from the permanent collection that to me represent some interesting through lines. This is Archie holding a Peter Volk. I'm going to click through them quick and then draw some lines between them and I'll go through them again more thoroughly. I'm going to go back to my, oops, hang on. I just did something funny. Okay, the next slide. Okay, so I'm calling this riff that I'm doing here space, place, and time because these are connections that through the works that I see going through here, and they're all grounded here of this place. So look at the lines of this map. Is the grid of Helena being swallowed by the curves, or is the grid exploding out of the waves? And we'll come back to this map again too, but I thought it was really interesting. Okay. So first a disclaimer. Montana is not the landscape of my home. For me, it's a land of two. I call it the land of two. Too hot, too cold, too windy, too dry, too big, too beautiful, too full, too empty. Like, the colors are particular, expansive, and muted. So hold this image in your head, too. So this first piece I picked is by Branson Stevenson, a friend of Archie Bray and Peter Malloy. And their early discussions about art and making seemed to me to be key to the development of the Bray, because it's the intersections between and around ideas. So here I'm seeing space. I'm seeing lots of space, repeated and expanding. And the foreground here is somehow as hard to reach as the hills beyond. by Francesca. I love this image of the brickyard. The kilns that are there still resonate with the artists that come here today. So I'm looking at the color and the shapes and the compression of space, almost the total opposite of Branson's drawing, right? But here's space big. Oops, oh, go back. I'm thinking I could do it. Back one. Oh, never mind, you don't have
Okay.
I won't ask you to do that. Yeah. Forward home. So I'm looking at color and shapes and the compression, the opposite of Branson's drawings, but similar is that you can't really inhabit either. You couldn't inhabit that landscape, like it wasn't really available, and you can't inhabit this. Oh yeah, so it's there, but you can't see it. So now forward. Now that you've done that. I don't think that Frances gets enough credit for her contributions. She is still better known as the teacher of, rather than the artist in her own right. Kind of relegated to the role of birther rather than creator. And she was so interested in the materiality of things and of making as intellectual exercise. And we'll come back to this phrase a couple times, like the idea of making as an intellectual exercise. Okay, forwards. Then we have this piece by David Shaner. Right over here. I got it in white. And this seems to me to be almost Frances's kiln stacks personified and quieted and distilled. A three-dimensional depiction exactly halfway between Branson's drawing and Frances's image. And the kiln firing determines the color on the form, and the path of the flames through the kiln echoes the sunlight across the field. So there's still that echo of place and space there. This piece by Peter Volkes, which is funny because one of the pieces was a lot bigger than I thought, and the Peter Volkes litho was a lot smaller than I thought, but it's still really beautiful. So maybe this is the same stack that we just saw, that's exploding or disintegrating. It has a heat of fire in it, and smoke and soot. And think back on the Branson drawing, and you can feel the heat coming from the ground, and the sense of bitterness, brittleness, and potential. So here's another Volkes platter. This is the little plate that's smaller than I thought. The plate that's down there. So are they flowers or explosions seen from above? Again, I have that sense of heat, edges of wind and soot. And it's the total engagement of art and material. Jesse Wilbur, this lovely, lovely magpie. A burst of magpies by Jesse Wilbur. I watched the magpie chicks hatch this spring, watched them fledge as small squawking balls, watched their tails grow and their feathers take on a wicked shine, and they watched me too with their bright eyes dancing. After about 2 years here, my eyes are adjusting to the colors, and I could begin to see some of the edges of brightness displayed here. At first, while I was here, I'm like, I see no color, I see brass. But now I can start to see some of the color. It's really interesting. Okay. Next. Oh, I love this piece, Jenny DeWeese. As if, and this is a lovely giant piece over here, as if the world was constructed of bright, flat blocks that stacked to the sky, and that sense of space teetering. The sky and the background is somehow closer and more palatable than the mountain in the distance. I was at Chico Hot Springs the other day, and sitting in the mist of the morning, I contemplated a hill that rose so steeply that Anna had to look up so high that my brain kind of blurred. It's like, we don't have those kind of hills in Ohio. Leela Audio, am I saying that right? Leela Audio, the gravel pit. So these shapes now are familiar, right? We've seen these. Like there's the stacks from Frances and the Frances print and David Shaner bottle, the flashing white that form clouds and snow and magpies. And even though they're none of these things, like this is a gravel pit, the abruptness of the space hits you and at the same time softly devolves into space. So there's a sense of being both engulfed and prevented from going into the space. I think is really interesting. So here's the Rudy Audio piece. And the dancers, for me, are becoming kind of both of and on the landscape. As they split the word landscape itself into two. So from one word landscape, meaning a broad and deep view that we take in from a distance, into two words. The solidity of land that grounds us, literally, of the dirt, and where we stand, and scape. As a word, the visual representation of an expanse. I hear the wind blow through that word escape, like the leaves scraping the ground as things tumble. And this piece, I imagine looking at this piece from above as if it were a map, and I see lines drawn, and look at the edges. Can you see the landscape from above? So we're back here. Oh, one more. I forget to keep one.
That one?
Oh, one back. That one.
Okay.
As if the lines are the lines of the dancers. So now go one.
Forward or back?
Forwards.
Okay.
So if you combine, now go backwards, what I'm going to make. So if you combine the shapes here, now forwards, and the colors here. Okay, one more. You might just end up here. So now we're going to go backwards a little bit and look at the 10 images again and loop them back and around and shifting our understanding through these connections. So Rudy Audio, born in Butte, Montana. Oh, go back still. He lived in his native state for most of his career. He headed the ceramics area at the University of Montana for 28 years and retired as professor emeritus of the School of Fine Arts. Prior to his appointment at the University of Montana, he was a founding resident artist at the Archie Bray Foundation in Helena. Okay, one forwards. I love this picture, taken in 1952 at the Bray. Here's Yanagi and Leach and Hamada as they toured across the U.S., bringing a new idea of a bridge between art and crafts, between the corporeal world of the body and the elevated world of the mind. And what you see here is a spark, the beginning of something new. I love that Peter and Rudy are in the center of this, young and fresh in shirt sleeves and blue jeans with big smiles and open hearts. So good. And the pot that sits on the table between them is a melamine, which is a salt glazed jug that's common in the 15th and 16th centuries in Europe. And this jug is still at the Bray. I smile every time I see it, run my fingers over the surface. The tangible connection collapses time and space. You get like that flutter of wings, the flash of the sun, like it's all right there again, okay? So, Peter Vokus. This is from the Smithsonian's website. After serving in the U.S. Army Air Force from 43 to 46, Peter Vokus entered Montana State College, earning a BS degree in 1951, and the following year an MFA at California College of Arts and Crafts in Oakland. Returning to Montana in 52, he established a pottery workshop in Helena. In 53, teaching a 3-week-long summer course at Black Mountain College in North Carolina, Vokus met innovative figures in the arts such as Joseph Albers, Robert Rauschenberg, and John Cage, which significantly influenced the direction of his work. I would posit that perhaps it was the additional combination of Leach, Hamada, and Yanagi in the mix that gave his work the physicality and expressiveness for which he became widely known. I don't think that connection has ever really been brought to the forefront. So, Lila Audio, Montana modernist painter and artist who was born and raised in Great Falls, Montana. She earned a BA from Montana State and an MA from the University of Montana, Missoula. Starting as a painter, she created work influenced by abstract expressionism and late impressionism. She eventually moved on to other artistic mediums, creating abstract soft sculpture well before other artists worked with her gained recognition in the medium. In the 50s, Lila co-founded the Archie Bray Foundation along with Peter Vokus and her husband Rudy Audio, although history seems to have kind of erased her from that and given her very little credit. During the 5 years she was in residence, she taught classes and produced pottery. And now Frances Senska, one more. So during World War II, Frances Senska was in the women's branch of the United States Naval Reserve, the WAVES, Women Accepted for Volunteer Emergency Service. She was stationed in San Francisco, where she was introduced to the potter's wheel at a night class taught by Edith Heath of Heath Ceramics. Senska studied with Maya Bertel at Cranbrook, and later with Marguerite Wildenheim at Pond Farm. Frances is like the Forrest Gump of ceramics. She seems to have been present at all the major junctions and shifts in thought. Known primarily for her service to the field, rather than as an artist herself, she influenced the development of Archie Bray Foundation from its very beginning. It was a founding member of the Montana Institute for Arts at the Montana Arts Council. One of my favorite stories that I've heard about her is she taking Rudy and Pete up the hill to the pass to get clay in her new car and just loading it in clay, just in the back seat. So good. She was a professor who founded the ceramics program at Montana State College in 1946. She taught her students ceramics from clay to firing, digging, drying, grinding, mixing of clay, the forming and final firing process. So here we are again, the idea of making as an intellectual exercise. Every part is important. So census students, Rudy Audio, Peter Volkus. David Shaner. David Shaner's illustrious career as a sculptor and potter spanned more than 4 decades. Trained in the late 50s at Alfred University School of Ceramics, Shaner became the director of the Archie Bray Foundation for the Ceramic Arts in Helena. After leaving Helena, he became nationally acclaimed studio potter and sculptor, working out of his home and studio in Big Fork, Montana. And think about the linking of those 2 words, because this is a new thing. Studio potter and sculptor, not studio potter or sculptor, right? Put the 2 things together. That certainly represented something new in the one. Jesse Wilbur, one of Montana's most notable artists during the better part of the 20th century, beloved educator, exceptional painter, collage artist, printmaker. She received her master's degree from Colorado State College of Education in 1938 and began teaching at the Montana State University in Bozeman in 1941. She taught in the art department until her retirement in 1973. Jessie was very active in the Montana art scene, founding member of the Montana Institute of the Arts, and she and her partner, Frances Senska, shaped generations of Montana art and artists. I love that. Okay. Genevieve DeWeese was born on January 10th, 1921 in Indianapolis, Indiana. She graduated from Ohio State University, which is where she studied with Hoyt Sherman, and she received a bachelor's degree in the fine arts. Jenny and her husband Bob became prominent members of the Montana art and intellectual community, and are credited with the development of the modern art movement in Montana. Their son Josh was a much-loved director of the Archie Bray Foundation for many years. Jenny also has a Forrest Gumpian moment herself when she has a cameo in the classic book Zen and the Art of Motorcycle Maintenance. I had some guys come through on bikes and stuff that I didn't know about, so I had to run down to the library and find it. That was really good. Yeah, so fun. But this brings up an interesting connection that I think is too delicious to be mixed. I was a professor of fine arts at Ohio State University, Hoyt Sherman employed the Flash Lab, which was a darkened room where images would be briefly flashed upon the screen, and the students were there to draw what they had seen. So this would later be cited by Roy Lichtenstein, who was one of his students, as having an influence on his work. He was also known for his work with optics in the field of visual art, having a theory similar to Hans Hofmann's push and pull. And I have to point out this connection because Archie Bray himself had a degree in ceramic engineering from OSU. We have his thesis project in our permanent collection. It's a lovely little jug that looks like a pig. It's very cute. I was a professor at Ohio State for 25 plus years and spent many hours in the Flash Lab. It's an amazing thing because this is like in the 30s, right? And it represents. I don't think that contribution to modernism and expressionism has ever been fully made. But it's here that drawing becomes, drawing's conceived of as a physical expression rather than an allegory. Right? It's not about a story, telling a story about humans or telling a story about love. It's about how does it feel. And that's what you see in Jesse Wilbur's work, or Peter Volkus's work, or Rudy Audio's work. Like, how does it feel? And I love the strange portal connection between Ohio and Montana. So we're back to this again. The lines, the lines drawn between the 10 and the connections between, one more. So space, one more. We're looking for the leader. Audio, please. No, one more. Back the other way. Right past the map. Back more. More. Yes. Oh. There, yes. So we're looking at space. Oh. It's going, it doesn't matter. We're looking at space. And again, we talked about like the things I was thinking about and looking at. It's like that funny, in all these pieces, there's this compression of space and expansion of space. And one doesn't really win over the other, but they both appear at the same time, which I think is really interesting. So whether it's this lovely watercolor or this Jesse's magpies that are like so flat and squished and then so jumping off the page. Or this piece by Jenny where the sky is like, goes like that over your head like a wave. Or this Francis Senska piece where, like, I don't think a human could fit in there, right? The space is so compressed and so tight. And then there's that tower that on the David Shamer piece. And the exploding tower on the Peter Volkus lithograph. And again, it seems like if you looked at it from the air, that would be the kilns, right? The chimneys. And this, the idea, oh, one more. The idea of this is a map, right in that map of Helena. So again, like the compression of space, the expansiveness, one more, the expansiveness of space, but also, like it's also compressed. Like, oh, go back one more. Like for in here, like you can't step past that first shrub, right? You can't go in there. It's full. My too full, too empty, too dry, too hot, too cold. Too many things. And here, oh, one more. Here, where this becomes, again, like if you split landscape into two things, and you have the solidity of the thing, and then you have the skitteriness of the other thing, the bodies. So, one more. Oh, so we're mapping connections here. And one more. Returning to center. Here's Elaine Boston. So, and thank you for indulging my thread pulling. It's been great fun. That's it. Thanks.
If anybody has any questions.
Or I continue, so I'm not ready.
Do you know, I have a question.
Yeah.
You know, you were talking about the connection between Ohio and Montana. There's obviously a really big connection between Montana and the Bay Area as well. And you mentioned John Cage and Peter Volkus being friends. Because Peter was in the Bay Area teaching, right? Do you know anything else about that relationship? I'm just curious because
I just thought it was really interesting that he ran into those guys about like right after he had run into Holiday and Harvey, like at Rockmont College, right? So it was just kind of like all those things were still there and still so fresh, and a lot of that, you know, the stuff that Rauschenberg and Cage were doing, it was too about like the moment, right? Not about the idea of the thing, but the thing itself, right? How does it feel? How does it sound? How does it look? Not what's it supposed to be telling us?
Well, because John Cage was professor of music at Mills College, which is also in the Bay Area, so they must have had lots of crossover in that area.
Yeah. I'm an East Coast girl.
Well, Pete loved music and played the guitar beautifully.
Did he?
So that connection really makes a lot of sense.
Well, because it's almost the same thing, too, right? When you think about music, it's that experiential, right? It's not like, yeah.
So you got me curious about 1951, 1952. I was just over in Missoula at the Montana Museum of Arts and Culture, and in their permanent collection, they have some of Henry Molloy's paintings,
Nice.
Peter's, I think, brother, is. And some of the stuff is like Matisse-like, and it's like, so I'm imagining the summer at a bar with all these people hanging around talking to each other, as this stuff is all emerging, and I wonder if anybody's written about that time frame much, how all those people must have, you know, been at each other's places for dinner or whatever.
We're all chatting.
They were making this all up.
There's Michelle, how do you pronounce Michelle? Coriel just wrote a great book about Montana modernism. That was, for me, coming out to Montana, I was like, I thought it was just Charlie Russell and boys. I had no idea that there's this deep river of kind of modernism that runs through Montana. And it, again, makes me think about, is it space or place? And then I read some of the early writings about like Archie Bray and Roy Stevenson and those guys, and they spent so much time together talking, right? They're talking about like, what could this thing be? Like, what does it mean to make stuff out of ceramics? What is it? And they're figuring it out, like there's no no YouTube channel, they had to build their own
I'm
films.
interested too, given our world today where this stuff is so ubiquitous if you're interested. But, knowing some of the politics of the early 50s, knowing Montana was at that time, pretty conservative state, and yet there was this really vigorous kind of art scene. They had a symphony, they had this speaker series at the Civic Center. It'd be interesting for someone to look into that.
Yeah, I know Archie's original plan was to make the Bray like music, theater, and art. It was going to be all those things.
Well, that program he started, it's still in existence. I forgot what's it called, the Helena Presents, is that?
Oh,
everything that happens at the Civic Center, that's the program he started.
Yeah.
Community concert series, not the Myrna Loy. He used to push the piano out on the stage in his work clothes. And so he was a culture guy here in Helena in the 50s.
But it was really interesting too, because it's like culture as a way of working and as a way of being. It's not like a thing that sits beside, right? You go get cleaned up and then you do it. You just do it, right? It's so interesting. Yeah, George.
I have a question about something you just said. That doesn't necessarily have anything to do with the subject matter
Yeah.
we're discussing. So when you said, what is it, the sky, the mountains, the atmosphere, the color, would you agree that people can work somewhere and that the environment or the landscape has little to do with their work, that their reason for working and their impetus and their style can have little to do with where they are?
Yeah, but I think again, Montana, too hot, too cold, too windy. It demands, right? You can't just be like, la la la, I'll just go outside, right? It's always some kind of challenge. I think here there's like a push all the time. Like I said, even if it's too beautiful, it's too beautiful to go work here. It's too hot. Not today. It was so nice. But I'm thinking about, like, my daughter lived in Hawaii for a while, and it was like it's always 70 and sunny, so it doesn't really, there's no pressure to get things done because it will be 70 and sunny tomorrow. It's really, so the sense of time is different here. I think here there's always summer's going to be short, you'll get ready for winter. And the daylight here, like already, I was out working in the garage the other night, it was like so dark, and it's been dark a long time. It must be 10 o'clock, it was like 20 after 8 or something. So I think it's, and I think Montana must attract people who are not oblivious to that pressure of the environment. Like I said, whether it's beautiful or cold or horrible. Because it's way far. Chip?
Yeah, well, about the inspiration of place, it doesn't necessarily always come out literally, but it's a place of inspiration, and how that comes through can be so many different ways that may not show up as a landscape, but it's there.
Yeah.
It's here.
I think that's true because I remember when I was an undergrad, one of my professors said, to be an artist, you have to have the thinnest skin possible because you got to be able to absorb everything. So you got to just be open to everything. And you also have to have the thickest skin possible because you got to be able to do what you need to do. People tell me that's stupid. I think that's true. So when I was looking, I was like, okay, what am I gonna, it's like I said, since I don't feel like I have anywhere near the depth of knowledge to approach this topic from a historical point of view, like who talked to who and what was going on in the world, but I was like, but I can be sensitive to what I'm seeing in like the space and the colors. And even for me, like after 2 years, I start to see things a little bit differently. Like I said, like I can see colors in the fall, like I couldn't at all the first year. Like I remember Brad, who I worked with, was like, oh my gosh, the colors. I'm like, I see brown. I see brown and a little bit of yellow. And then he said, oh, the fall is 2 weeks. I'm like, yeah, what the heck? He's like, it lasted so long this year. We used to like 3 months of every color. But it's interesting to see to note that the way that I'm looking at color has shifted. Like I can see more colors this fall than I could before. that stuff has to. Like nothing happens in a vacuum. So, and I think that there's something about, maybe it's the isolation of Montana, especially in the 50s when you just had, if you wanted to do something, you had to do it. It wasn't like you ordered a bunch of paint and you ordered some canvases and you're doing some things. These guys are, and these people are just, figuring out how to do it. And again, that the idea of making as intellectual activity, I think, was really crucial to that shift between ceramics just being a domestic object that you eat off of, that you put flowers in, to being something that was considered something you did with your mind, or something that you thought about in a different way. So I think that's really interesting. I think that's, and getting people together, because that's still what the Bray does best, is bringing like that picture of the five, when you have those five there, and there's just five people from very different backgrounds, and they're all coming together, and they're spending some time together, and then they come apart, and it's just like this catalyst. I think it's really amazing. And that's still what we do here, and what ceramics as a community has always said really well. So I love it that time period too, like pulling in different things, what's happening in theater, what's happening in music, what's happening in art. I think that those things all need to overlap more. So, yeah.
Since you're an artist yourself, and I don't know how much making you do these days, because I'm sure you're busy, but has your work at all been influenced since being at the Bray by either Montana or the artists or the history or anything? Has that shaped the way that you view your own work, or like?
Yeah, and it's funny because I've never been an artist that I don't work with a intention, like I just show up. And I think part of it has to do because I've been doing administrative jobs for so long, but I work with kind of relentless incrementalism. I'm in the studio every morning before work, I try to get in during lunch, and then after work, and at the weekends. And I just have to show up in the studio and see what's going on. So there's so many fascinating things. I have these weird little clouds. I'm making these strange clouds. There's so many clouds here that are separated. Like, in Ohio, it's like one cloud. Gray for months and months, one giant cloud. So there's clouds, there's mountains, there's pieces of, there's so many pieces of detritus all around the Bray, little pieces of rocks and little pieces of bricks. So fascinated by this, kind of the small things that then are the large things. So definitely. And it's so great. I taught for years and I've always loved that. Like that sea of things when people are working on things that are new, I think is really the best place to be. Because the hallway conversations you have when you're just walking down the hallway, and it's always, like in ceramics, we have a pretty high failure rate, so I'm always like, awesome. Like, I feel like now my work is like, let's make a mistake, and then let's spend like 6 months fixing it. So, it's good. Like when something comes out of the kiln and it's horrible, or it melted or fell over, it's like, all right, game on. Let's do something. It becomes this conversation. So it's a really great way to work. And I love being around all the other artists that are from, across the country and around the world. It's fascinating. And I also love, we're doing like Bray's a place of like radical welcome. You can come into the studios and ask people what they're doing, and they're all willing to share and talk to people. And I think that's super important. It's good. My favorite color is still yellow, the brightest yellow possible. It's probably not gonna go away.
That's why you like Jen's.
Yeah. Well, I think yellow is the only color that gives out more light than it takes in, right? It reflects out. It's good. It's also the color you can see from farthest away, which is why raincoats used to always be yellow. Because you can see it even when it's wet. Good. Any other questions, comments? I hope you all come out to the Bray. We have an amazing group of artists out there working now. It's really fun. And get out there before it gets really cold and dark. Although we'll be there then. So.
Too cold, too dark.
We're joining the Bray next summer back for
That's right.
the residents, and it'll be, I can't remember exactly the dates, but our
Sometimes summerish, yeah.
So it'll be in the Bear Gallery, so come next summer, and we'll have the residents on exhibit at that time too.
Oh, and the other thing that's so exciting that we're doing right now is that, so we're 3 years old now. Every artist who's come through the Bray has left a piece for the permanent collection. When I first got there, I'm like, where's the permanent collection? They're like, well, it's in that garage, it's in that garage, it's in that storage container. So in 73 years, it's never been comprehensively cataloged, photographed, digitized, available. So when we first started, we thought we had like 700 pieces. Now I think we're up to 1,400. And the idea, the thing that's so cool about it is that, so there's just 1,400 pieces, we have 26 acres, but all the making happens like pretty much in that 1 acre. So it's like a volcano of ceramics, right? If you think about it over the years, there's like 1,400 pieces coming out of the ground right there, right? So, and it's interesting too, because often the artists we get are kind of young or early in their careers, or they come here because they're shifting or doing something different. So it likely is not going to be anyone's like best piece, but it's going to have the kernel of something that's really interesting. And the fact that it's all made there, I think is going to be amazing. And once we get it all out, it's going to be fabulous. Like the idea that you go in there and be like, what the heck happened in the 80s? But that you can see, you know, the thing next to the thing next to the thing. Because artists are always influenced by other artists. We need to be around artists. So it's really good. So keep your eye on that.
And we're hosting your 75th anniversary.
Which will be Treasures from the Vault. Yeah, Treasures from our Vault. Be good.
So there's still lots of collaboration between the two institutions.
Definitely. Good.
Thank you so much for that.
Thank you.